It was Quinyon Mitchell's pro day today, and he told us something very interesting about the Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your, let's say, final listen of the day. Maybe your first listen tomorrow. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. What is up, everybody? This is Jake Arthur and Andrew Moore from HorseshoeHuddle.com. We're digging deeper in the Horseshoe Huddle well today, just me and Andrew. But today was Quinyon Mitchell's pro day. He, of course, is one of the most popular targets for the Colts there at 15, the cornerback out of Toledo. Two mock drafts came out today, Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper. They both had Quinyon Mitchell there at 15. So it's starting to steam up a little bit. Now, Andrew, unfortunately, Quinyon did not work out today. I don't really think either of us really expected it, even though we made the drive, but we're really more wanting to talk to him. But this is a guy that does not have anything left to prove. Number one, when you're from a smaller school, you want to on film, you want to put out that you've dominated that competition. Check. Went to the Senior Bowl, dominated there. Did so well that he left early. He took care of that. At the Combine, he measured bigger and tested a little better than Terrion Arnold, who is widely considered the top corner in the draft. So he really didn't need to do anything at his pro day today. So he came out, and really the highlight for you and me was getting to talk to him.
Yeah, and like you said, he really didn't have anything to prove out there. He went out, had a very good combine performance, and really there was no need for him to run the 40, no need for him to do the positional drills. He's kind of he's standing on his tape and standing on his workouts, and I think that's perfectly fine, especially when you have the type of combine performance that Quinyon Mitchell did. But yeah, it was interesting to talk to him today. Definitely not a guy that his voice doesn't travel very far.
Oh, no.
I would say very quiet guy, keeps to himself, but a very you can tell he's very mature player. Definitely took time to answer all of our questions. Very polite. When we were asking him questions, looked us right in the eye. And some players, I mean, that might seem like something looks small, but some players don't do that. He just portrayed himself as very confident, and it was interesting to hear talking with him about his pre-draft process, how he has some workouts lined up with teams down the road. But obviously what really stood out was, and we both reported it today, putting it out on X, is that he really hasn't had much contact with the Indianapolis Colts so far in this draft process. So obviously you last year it was a different story with the quarterback situation, and the Colts, specifically Morocco Brown, was consistently talking to Anthony Richardson and staying in his ear. But as we were kind of talking about this before we went on air, just because the Colts aren't talking to Quinyon Mitchell doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to take him. We talked about, you gave the examples, Quentin Nelson and Kwity Paye, two guys that really didn't have much contact with the Colts before the draft, ended up being first-round picks in Indianapolis. So just because he hasn't talked with the Colts doesn't mean that he is off their boards. And in fact, I think he's probably cornerback 1 or 2 based on his traits, the type of person he is, and what I have seen on film for Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone on here, you guys know about Zach's thing, Build-A-Ballard. I believe Quinyon was the top corner, or if not, he's one of the top 2 corners on there. So there's nothing about him that doesn't fit the Colts. And, I just don't think there's any dirt to find necessarily. Like, he's always kept his nose pretty clean. Like, he seems like a very smart, mature kid. And even today, there wasn't a big contingent. The only Colts representative you and I saw was Midwest scout Mike Lacey. And he was, kind of divvying up his attention everywhere. Because, I mean, again, Mitchell didn't work out, but I'm not really surprised by that. I think all they need to see there is on the film. He's got the size, the athleticism, the tenacity. He's a corner that is not shy about tackling either, so that's definitely a positive. So I don't really know how much there is to find out there. Now, the Senior Bowl or the Combine or perhaps any visits there to Toledo throughout last season, I'm sure there's been some contact at some point, or the Colts doing their homework. They're definitely doing their homework behind the scenes at least. But yeah, I don't really think that's cause for concern. It's very common. I think it's the guys later in the draft they have to do a little more digging on and meeting face to face. So I don't really think that's much of a big deal. Yeah, that I know a lot of people get kind of in a tizzy. We keep track of who meets with who. And again, what is this? There's probably like 5-6 weeks left before the draft. There's still visits to be had. And even if he doesn't have a visit, if he's there on the board at 15, I would still expect him to be one of their top few candidates.
I would too. And quarterback is a little bit different. Obviously, when you're making that big of a decision for your franchise, of course you're going to be in communication with all of those prospects. But with guys like cornerback, defensive ends, offensive linemen, wide receivers, it's not really necessary, I don't think, to be in such constant communication with those guys. And a lot of times what the Colts do is the guys they bring in for visits, those are the guys that they still have some question marks on, whether it's medicals, whether it's something that they've seen on film, or that doesn't necessarily line up where they think they're with their traits, and they just want some explanation on that. They want to be able to run through their own drills. They want them to go through their own medical, see their own team doctors, things like that. And when you think of it from that point of view, Quinyon Mitchell really doesn't need to do any of that. There really aren't many question marks with him. You know what kind of guy that you're getting. You're getting an athletic freak at the cornerback position, great speed, a fantastic speed, really, with 4.33. And then when you look at the tape, I mean, he's good in press man. He's good in off zone. Got long arms. Physical with opposing wide receivers. And while he did play at Toledo, you've also seen him go toe to toe with the likes of Marvin Harrison Jr. So he has played against tougher competition and held his own, no problem. So when you're looking at the grand scheme of things, no, I don't think it's anything to be alarmed about. I don't think just because the Colts haven't really spent much time with Quinyon Mitchell doesn't mean they're not going to draft him. Also doesn't mean that they are. Just because they haven't spoken to him doesn't mean that that's 100% their target. But if I would assume, just by the traits, seeing what the Colts have done over the years, the types of cornerbacks they really like, the type of cornerback they would probably like to place opposite of Juju Brents, Quinyon Mitchell, in my opinion, has to be one of the top 3 or 4 players that the Colts are going to be choosing from at that number 15 pick.
Yeah, and I think the 2 biggest question marks about him entering the pre-draft process was the lack of press coverage, a lot of off coverage at Toledo, and just the level of competition. I think he checked both of those off at the Senior Bowl because he was locked into receivers' hip pockets there, and at the Senior Bowl was arguably the best player there. So that's 2 huge things, and we all know the Colts love Senior Bowl performers. But a couple other small things I really liked that we heard from him. I asked, what does it look like behind the scenes for you? Because everyone can see the tape, but like, what is preparation like for you? And he said, the film study and what you do on the practice field and everything, that is what sets you up for game day. So like, this is a guy that does put value in the small things and the preparation. He seems like a guy, they pay me for practice, but the game day is free. That type of guy, and then of course, a very talented player, played his career at Toledo, a smaller school. We're in the raging age of the transfer portal and everything now. Everyone trying to move if their role isn't what they want, or going to a higher level. And he was asked about that as well. And this guy just really loves to be around his teammates. So it seems like he would be a strong locker room presence as well. Obviously not a very outspoken guy, but seems like a lead by example type of player.
I would agree, and I think when you're looking at the types of guys that the Colts want, they like guys that are loyal. I mean, not very many guys that the Colts have drafted since Chris Ballard took over as GM have transferred. Most of the guys
Mm,
have stayed at the same school, and it wasn't for a lack of talent that Quinyon Mitchell didn't get and transfer to another school. I mean, he could have transferred to probably any college in the country. Chose to stay at Toledo. He even mentioned that today, that he was happy that he stayed at Toledo, was able to spend his entire college career with the same coaching staff in the same uniform, and Toledo has now become his second home, and it means everything to him that he was able to do that. So for looking for those high character guys, those high football character guys, especially the ones that really take practice seriously, I mean, that has to be music to the Colts ears.
absolutely. And so here in a second, we've talked about it a little bit, but we're gonna get more into Mitchell's fit with the Colts and look at like what the rest of that supporting cast is like. And so far, without any moves really in that area, how likely that all may be with him actually being the pick at 15. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're actually going to have while you're out. I personally love Gametime because if I feel like being spontaneous, going to a show or something on a whim, I can go right to them and not have to browse through a bunch of different places. And with their flash deals, images of seat views, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime is a very easy choice. If you're in Indy, I know outside of Indy, people don't think there's much going on, but we know there is stuff going on all the time, all sorts of venues and forms of entertainment. So Gametime is definitely a one-stop shop. They're the place for last-minute ticket deals, period. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for, again, football, basketball, all of it. Concerts, comedy, theater. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And to me, that shows a true guarantee because they're going to give you all your money back plus more if you find a better deal somewhere else. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And as you all know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, it is starting to heat up, and I know you guys are into it. Mark your calendars for March 20th. That's tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Again, on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get local insights from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, so baseball, it is still football season here all year long. So fit with the Colts. Again, we mentioned this kind of at the top of the show. We're getting into peak mock draft season, and two of the biggies, Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah, both have Quinyon Mitchell going. It makes too much sense. And, you know, they're just two of the latest. Like we see Mitchell might be the most frequently mocked to the Colts outside of Brock Bowers. And so if you look at what the Colts have done so far, we know they like who they've got with Juju Brents and, you know, Kenny Moore and Jalen Jones, Dallas Flowers. But we also know they want to keep going because they committed to going young in the whole secondary last year. To me, that's not just like a one-year project. If you look at what they wanted to do at linebacker when they brought in Matt Eberflus in 2018, it took them 2 years really to do what they wanted. So I think they're going to keep going. Whatever the validity of the L'Jarius Sneed stuff is, I think we can all agree they want another corner who's capable of playing starter snaps. And that is why cornerback is such a popular pick in the first round, because this is a really good group. Whatever your flavor, Terrion Arnold, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, whoever it is, like there are options. So we talked about Mitchell pretty much checks every box athletically, size wise. He's got the right mentality. And I think he would be able to play right away. I know he comes from the MAC, smaller school, but there's just nothing really there to me that doesn't fit the Colts. So again, we have talked about why it makes sense at 15, but why don't you tell me, regardless of whether the Colts add a significant player at the position in free agency, if you think they still should go for Mitchell or not at 15?
I think it depends. If you're adding a difference maker, say for example, if they did trade for L'Jarius Sneed, pay him a bunch of money, you're paying him $20 million a year, then you probably want to go elsewhere, because when if you're drafting Quinyon Mitchell, you're drafting him to be the starter. If he's going to be a top 15 pick, those guys are drafted to come in and be an impact player right away. So if the Colts absolutely do fall in love with Quinyon Mitchell, it could help explain why they're not making as big a push for a starting level cornerback currently. Again, we're still only about a week into free agency, so we'll see what happens. But at this time, it doesn't seem like the Colts feel the desperation or feel the need to go out and sign and get a top level outside corner right away. They're letting the process play out. And there are still names out there if you want to talk reunion, Stephon Gilmore, Rock Yassin are still out there. I think Steven Nelson still out there, Xavier Howard. So there are some bigger names, but it just doesn't seem like the Colts, again, they're comfortable with where they're at, and we don't feel like they need to make a move out of desperation, I would say. But if you're drafting Quinyon Mitchell there at 15, you're drafting him to be that impact starter. You're drafting him to start right away from day one, opposite of Juju Brents. And I think when you look at Juju Brents and Quinyon Mitchell, their skill sets really help one another, I would say, and their skill sets kind of fit. Juju Brents, you're talking about a really big, long corner, loves the physicality, loves to help out in the run game. Maybe isn't the fastest guy, as we've seen, especially going up against like a Nico Collins week 18. So he's not necessarily going to be able to stick with the burners, but he's going to be a guy that can test almost every single throw, be that physical corner. Quinyon Mitchell, he has the speed. He has the ball skills, something that I think this Colts cornerback group is lacking. Because Kenny Moore had 3 interceptions, Juju Brents had 1, Jalen Jones had 0. They need a guy that can take the football away, and I think that the Colts were expecting that with Isaiah Rodgers before everything went down with the gambling situation, and then when he was cut, they really didn't have a ball hawk per se. Yes, Kenny Moore had 3 interceptions and 2 of them returned for a touchdown, but you're looking for a guy that can be a consistent threat to take the ball away every single game. More turnovers is really what this defense needs to continue to work on, and I think that's Quinyon Mitchell. 6 interceptions over the last 2 seasons. Isn't afraid to go up and battle with the best wide receivers. And what really stood out to me about his ball skills specifically was at the Senior Bowl. How he set different guys up to be able to take the football away in those practices. He never felt like he was behind ever. He was very calculated with the risk that he took, and knew what position he needed to be in order to make a play on the football. So that's why I think that Brents and Mitchell really complement each other. Brent's the bigger, more physical cornerback that can help in run support. And while Mitchell can do that too, Mitchell is your ball hawk. Mitchell's your guy that can really take the football away, has the ball skills, has the speed, and that's the guy you're gonna stick typically on your faster, quicker, deep threat wide receivers.
Yeah, definitely not lacking in ball skills. He got onto the map a couple years ago with a 4-pick game, so I think he's fine there. But for me, I think the only move the Colts could make before the draft that would discourage me from them going with Mitchell or any, because I would be down with Arnold or DeGene also. Really, it's only Sneed because that's a sign and trade multi-year deal. That's going to be a minimum of 3 years that they sign him to. We know with these other guys, Gilmore, Nelson, Rock, those are only going to be 1-2 year deals max. So those guys aren't factoring into your long-term future. But yeah, I think Sneed is really the only one because you're committing to him long term. You already are committing to Juju Brents long term. You hope he's there 8-10 years, whatever. Now that doesn't mean you shouldn't add competition, but they're obviously they can allocate those resources elsewhere. You want to get more explosive on offense. There's other things you want to do. Safety is a mess because they're not really doing anything there either. But yeah, I think Sneed is really the only move that I probably would look elsewhere from corner. Again, I don't think they have to go corner, but like I want them to have the opportunity to do it. And I just think it becomes incredibly unlikely if they do trade for Sneed that they already go back to it and get a corner. So coming up, we're going to talk about some of the other guys, the guys that actually worked out at Toledo's Pro Day today. Some standouts. There's a linebacker that a lot of you guys wanted us to look at, and he stepped up. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, that you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this. Now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from another retirement account with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. Andrew, I know you really, really wanted me to try and fly through that disclaimer at the end like a normal commercial, but I'm just not with it.
Quite a mouthful right there.
7 hours of driving today. I'm not here for it, buddy. But let's talk about some of these guys that we actually saw work out on the field today. So you and I both, outside of Quinyon, obviously, who did not work out, the number one player people wanted us to check out was Dallas Gant, the linebacker, Ohio State transfer. And I tell you, he did pretty well. I think he did pretty good on his jumps. Let me go back and find where that was. So we had a 35-inch vertical and a 10.6 broad. So those were really good. And then he was only one of a couple linebackers or a couple players that did linebacker drills. One of them was Terrence Taylor, who's an edge player, and really, after seeing him in those drills, he's an edge player.
Yes, definitely.
Because seeing the two players in contrast, there was really no comparison. Gant looked smooth, moved great sideline to sideline, caught the ball with ease, flipped his hips well. I thought Gant, he probably was my biggest standout of the day.
I would agree. And what caught our eyes at first was obviously the explosive test, the jumps with the vertical and the broad jump. Right there, right off the bat. That's if I'm Chris Ballard, that catches my eye. You know how he always he's looking for those explosive linebackers and guys that can move well in space. You have to be an athletic, not only an athletic linebacker to play with the Colts, but you pretty much in today's NFL, you have to be able to cover sideline to sideline and move well in space. And Dallas Gant really showed that. I mean, his change of direction was very fluid, very smooth. He covered a lot of ground very, very quickly. And I think having that experience at Ohio State and then transferring to Toledo, I mean, two straight first team all MAC, led the Toledo Rockets in tackles the past 2 seasons. You're wondering, how is that going to translate to the NFL when at Ohio State he barely saw the field? But you saw what he did on the field today. The explosiveness, the change of direction really stood out to me, and his speed. His speed was there as well. So a guy that would not surprise me one bit if the Colts take a look at late on day 3 and say, this is a guy we can put on special teams. They love doing that with their linebackers. Look at Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed. Start him out on special teams as he continues to refine his game, get his footing in in there, and then potentially becomes their coverage linebacker for them. So Dallas Gant, definitely an intriguing option for the Colts, and I think a better fit than many people think. Definitely makes me want to dive into his game a little bit more.
Yeah, that's definitely a guy I'm going back, and I'm going to try and find a bit more of him. And then just a few other guys. Safety Nate Bauer, that is someone who I thought he had an all right day, but what I noticed most was, so we had a lot of his teammates around us throughout the day. A lot of people really pulling for that guy. So that makes me think that Bauer's probably a strong locker room guy. Probably just a special teamer in the NFL, but it's something I caught on to nonetheless. Judge Culpepper, his dad Brad played several years in the NFL. He is a defensive tackle, and I really noticed him in the bag drills. He was very impactful going through those. It's definitely, you want to see guys like that going through that with attitude, because I've seen NFL players go through those drills real lackadaisical, but this guy is in here for a job interview, and he kind of checked that box. There were some receivers. Actually, I want to give one shout out real quick to Youngstown State's Ryan Johnson, offensive lineman. Looks like he's going to play the interior. Really quick feet. I thought he moved really well in those drills that we saw, these specific offensive line drills. And then Emory Hunt, our guy Emory Hunt, I hit him up last night before I left. And I said, who do I need to be paying attention to outside of Quinyon Mitchell? And he mentioned Culpepper, but he also mentioned receivers Wayne Ruby from Mount Union and Mason Tipton. Actually, no, let's see. Yeah, Wayne Ruby and Mason Tipton from Yale. I thought both guys looked really, really good. Lacey seemed like an explosive type player. And Mason Tipton, that guy damn near jumped 40 inches in the vertical if he didn't keep shuffling his feet before. I thought he was absolutely electrically quick. Like, I was really impressed by those receivers as well.
Tipton's definitely an explosive athlete, and he moved around the field well in the receiver drills too. Mike, for when you look at it, Ruby definitely isn't the explosive athlete, which definitely I think will ding him with the Colts. But as far as his route running is concerned, easily the best route runner at that pro day today. Smooth in and out of his cuts, caught everything thrown his way, was really good tracking the deep ball and getting himself in position that he didn't have to make twisting catches, kind of was able to run underneath everything and make his quarterback, I think, look more accurate than he actually was. So while you're not going to get the high end athletic traits with Ruby, you're getting a guy that is a technician in his craft. But yeah, when Tipton jumped 40 inches right there in front of us, definitely an eye opener, and it makes you think that with those athletic traits, there's going to be a team that really takes a close look on Tipton, at least to start out on special teams.
Yeah, and then so I mentioned some guys outside of Toledo. They did have one guy from Pittsburgh State, one guy from Youngstown, two from Mount Union, and one from Yale. Keep an eye on those guys as UDFAs for the Colts if they match their metrics athletically, because Pittsburgh State, that's where Dallas Flowers is from. Mount Union, this was years ago, but that's where Pierre Garçon's from. Youngstown State, Drew Ogletree, and then Yale, I think Tyler Vargas from several years ago is from Yale. So
Rodney Thomas II.
Rodney Thomas is a Yale guy. So there's a track record from each of those schools that these guys were just invites, smaller school invites. So real possible for those guys to be UDFAs, or even, this is kind of a crummy year for day 3 of the draft. I think a lot of teams are going to be drafting the UDFAs they would have been signing this year. So look out for 7th rounders on some of those guys. But that's about it for us. Andrew and I are actually going to be up at Notre Dame on Thursday. So we might do something similar. We might record at Notre Dame, but we'll bring you something nonetheless. We'll give you guys our information that we gleaned from our most recent pro day visit. But before we hop off, remember that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it is also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. So be sure to check out that. And then, of course, Andrew is helping on this. Zach is also the linchpin of the Colts part of it. The Indy Draft Guide pre-orders are open for $8.99 with code DRAFTMISS. You guys get access to an essential piece of reading for Colts fans, both before and after the draft, featuring 225 plus in-depth scouting reports, features, and much, much more. Click the link in our show notes to pre-order today. And if you don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, and at Andrew Moore NFL on Twitter. Also, right after this, go over to Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube and follow them as well. That's the whole YouTube channel for our website. Andrew and Drake do regular shows throughout the week, and they are awesome. They are growing all the time. So you guys, if you love us, you will love them as well. Ratings and reviews as well, here and us, helps boost us up the charts, gets more eyes and ears on us. And with that, we will see you beautiful folks tomorrow.